Caitlin Clark, arguably the most marketable player in women's basketball right now, is being told she can't. No official explanation, no visible conflict, just a quiet, calculated shift that many see as a deliberate attempt to curb her rising influence. The number switch to May 17th seemed minor on the surface, but in the world of elite sports, identity and branding are everything. And stripping Clark of that symbolic number, just as she prepares to represent her country, has sparked a storm far bigger than expected.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
This isn't about uniform rules. It's about narrative control. Clark's ascent has disrupted the power dynamics in women's basketball and the way USA Basketball has treated her, from the Olympic snub to this jersey drama, suggests a deeper resistance to change. As her visibility grows, so does the tension between institutional tradition and modern athlete branding. What's unfolding isn't just a sports dispute. It's a reflection of the ongoing struggle female athletes face when their success starts challenging the old guard. Caitlin Clark is already one of the most talked about names in sports, and not just for what she does on the court. She's been breaking viewership records, dragging women's basketball into the mainstream spotlight, and proving, game after game, that she's not just good. She's a game changer. Her rise has been fast, loud, and undeniable. And with it, number 22 has become more than a jersey. It's a brand. It's her identity. It's a symbol of everything she's. So when Team USA told her to give it up, people noticed. This wasn't just some casual reshuffling of training camp jerseys. It was a targeted move. There was no one else in the camp wearing 22. No conflict. No issue. And yet, Clark was reassigned number 17. No explanation. No real reason. Just a quiet but unmistakable message. You're not in control here. That's what kicked off the outrage. Because this isn't just about a number. It's about power, influence, and the politics of women's sports. Clark didn't just become famous. She became too famous, too influential, too big to ignore. And for some people in charge, that's a problem. What's happening here is bigger than one player in a training camp. It's part of a larger pattern that's way too familiar. A woman rises through talent and sheer force of will, only to be met with silent resistance from the very systems that should be lifting her up. And the worst part? It's not even. This is the same Caitlin Clark who was left off the Olympic roster, despite being the most popular and arguably most impactful player in women's basketball. She didn't just have hype. She had numbers. She had history. And yet, Team USA passed on her. The excuses were vague, the reasoning unclear, and the timing felt calculated. Now, months later, they've invited her to training camp, but only after stripping her of one of the key symbols of her rise. Fans aren't dumb. They see the pattern. When the biggest name in the game keeps getting slighted while others are allowed to thrive uninterrupted, it stops looking like coincidence. It starts looking like strategy. The decision to force Clark into number 17 wasn't neutral. It was political. When you strip someone of their jersey number, especially one as iconic as Clark's 22, you're not just reassigning digits. You're taking away a piece of their story. You're minimizing the identity they've spent years building. And in her case, you're doing it with no legitimate reason. There is no other 22 at the camp. That's the part that makes this move so hard to defend. If there were a conflict, it could be chalked up to logistics. But there isn't. It's selective. And that selective enforcement makes it feel personal. Like a subtle reminder that she's still subject to the system, no matter how big she. This isn't about basketball performance. Clark has already proven she belongs. It's about control, about whether organizations like USA Basketball are ready to embrace a player who doesn't just participate in the game, but changes the rules entirely. And the reaction? Swift and brutal. Fans flooded social media. Comment sections exploded. Headlines dissected every angle. This wasn't some minor controversy. It was a full-blown PR nightmare. Because forcing Clark to change her number wasn't just tone-deaf. It was symbolic of a deeper issue in women's sports. The need to suppress rising stars when they disrupt the status quo. Caitlin Clark is a disruptor. Her presence alone threatens the old hierarchy. She's brought more eyes to the game than anyone else in recent memory. And instead of meeting that moment with support, Team USA has leaned into quiet resistance. Other players have worn 22 without issue. Aya Wilson, Cameron Brink. No controversy, no drama. But when Clark steps in, suddenly it's a problem. That double standard is loud, and people are calling it out. Let's not forget, this is happening in a space where women athletes are still fighting for basic equity, recognition, pay, visibility, respect. And here's a player who's checking every box, who's doing everything right, and still getting told to sit down, to change, to play along. Clark isn't just a basketball player. She's a cultural shift, and that shift doesn't come without friction. It never does. But watching it play out this way, through passive-aggressive number assignments and a history of quiet snubs, says a lot about how far we still have to go. The bigger picture here is hard to ignore. The more Clark excels, the more the system seems to push back. Not directly, not loudly, but through subtle, consistent moves that send one message. You don't get to lead this. It's an old playbook, one that punishes women who become too powerful, too beloved, too independent. And let's be clear, this doesn't just affect Clark. This affects every young player watching. Every girl who saw number 22 and thought, that could be me. What are they supposed to take away from this? That success comes with strings? That if you get too big, the system will find a way to cut you. This isn't the lesson anyone should be teaching. Especially not now, when women's basketball is finally getting the attention it deserves. The irony is painful. Clark is doing exactly what people have asked for, bringing in fans, growing the sport, elevating the brand. And this is how it's handled? It's not just a missed opportunity. It's a warning sign. The optics are terrible. The backlash is justified. And the trust? Fractured. And yet, through all of this, Caitlin Clark remains the same force she's always been. Focused, unbothered, still showing up, still putting up numbers, still moving the needle. That's the part Team USA doesn't seem to understand. You could try to dim her spotlight, but the culture has already chosen her. The public has already embraced her. And the more she's pushed down, the more support she... What this moment exposes is a much-needed conversation about athlete identity, about branding, about who gets to define legacy. Because this was never about one number. It's about whether women athletes are allowed to own their stories, or whether they'll always be at the mercy of institutions afraid of their power. If Team USA thought this would fly under the radar, they were wrong. This story has legs. It's already part of the larger narrative. And that narrative is clear. The people in charge aren't just resistant to change. They're scared of it. So now what? Fans are speaking up. Media is paying attention. The conversation isn't going away. And Caitlin Clark? She's not stepping back. She's not playing small. She never... But this whole debacle has done something else too. It's made the stakes clear. The next time an organization tries to silence a rising star, there's going to be pushback. Because this isn't just about one player. It's about every athlete who's been told they're too much. Every woman who's been asked to shrink herself. Every legacy that's been chipped away for the sake of someone else's comfort. This was a chance to do better. And they blew it. If you're as frustrated as everyone else watching this unfold, speak up. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think this was a deliberate move to control Clark's narrative? Like the video if you think players deserve to keep their identity on and off the court. Share this with someone who needs to understand why this number thing matters more than they think. And hit that subscribe button, because if this is how they treat the biggest name in the game, you can bet there's more. The silence from Team USA is almost as loud as the backlash. No press statement, no clarification, no acknowledgement of how this has been received publicly. Just a quiet swap of jerseys and the hope that nobody would notice or care. But people did notice. Because when a face of your sport is asked to give up the very number that helped define her rise, people pay attention. Fans, media, fellow players, it's not just basketball insiders anymore. The whole world is watching, and the consensus is brutally clear. This looks petty. It looks personal, and it reeks of a deeper issue that's been plaguing women's sports for decades. When Caitlin Clark walks into a room, the temperature changes. She's not just a player anymore. She's a cultural force. She brings new eyeballs, new money, and a whole new demographic of fans who finally feel like they have someone to root for. And for some reason, that has made people uncomfortable. Not because she's not talented, not because she's done anything wrong, but because she's built something outside of the system. She's become too influential, too fast, and not everyone in power is ready to hand over the reins to someone they didn't personally anoint. That's where this all starts to make sense. This isn't about jersey numbers. This is about control. Team USA isn't just trying to test Clark's humility. They're testing her obedience. They want to see if she'll play along, if she'll fall in line, if she'll do what she's told, even when it makes no sense. And the worst part? It's not even subtle. They didn't quietly assign her 17 because someone else had 22. No, 22 was just sitting there untouched, available, open, and yet it was taken from her. That's what makes this so obvious. The intent might not be spoken, but it's loud as hell. And let's be clear, Caitlin Clark has every right to field. This is the same athlete who's consistently been snubbed, downplayed, and overlooked by Team USA, even while the rest of the world was waking up to her impact. She wasn't just left off the Olympic roster. She was ghosted, essentially. No clear explanation, no valid reason, just passed over, while players with less reach, less performance, and less momentum were given the spotlight. And now, with the world finally tuned in, they want to bring her in under their terms. Not with respect, not with acknowledgement, but with control. Stripping her of her number is just another way of saying, you're not in charge here. We are. But it's 2025. That kind of power move doesn't fly anymore. Fans have social media. They have platforms. They have voices. And they're using them. They're not just questioning this decision. They're dragging it. Calling it what it is, a tone-deaf, ego-driven, brand-diminishing move that tells every young woman in sports exactly how little legacy matters when you don't play by the rules set by the old guard. Because again, this isn't just about Caitlin. This is about the system. The system that still sees women athletes as interchangeable, as disposable, as pawns to be moved around. The system that doesn't know how to handle a woman who's already built her own brand without waiting for permission. And so it punishes her, quietly, strategically, pettily, and yet, she keeps winning. That's the part that scares them. No matter what number you put on her back, Caitlin Clark is the story. She's the headline. She's the reason. People are tuning in, and that kind of power can't be hidden under a new jersey. It doesn't fade just because someone in a boardroom gets uncomfortable. But the damage has already been done. Fans are questioning the integrity of the organization. Other players are being pulled into the conversation, forced to compare their treatment to hers. And the trust? It's cracked. Because if this is how you treat your most valuable asset, what does that say about how you treat everyone else? There's something deeply unsettling about watching an organization diminish the very thing it claims to stand for. Growth, representation, visibility. Caitlin Clark brought all of that. She handed it to Team USA on a silver platter, and they responded by taking away her number. A number that represents her entire rise. A number that fans wear in the stands. A number that's become a symbol of something bigger than just one player. It's become a movement. And yet, they want to erase it. Start her over. Pretend that her legacy doesn't count unless it was earned their way. But guess what? That ship has sailed. Caitlin Clark doesn't need their approval. She already has something far more valuable. The court of public opinion. The fans. The people who actually make the game what it is. And those people are not staying quiet. They're reposting every clip. They're analyzing every roster decision. They're calling out the hypocrisy in real time. And they're doing it because they know what this really is. They know that women who rise too fast, too far, are often met with resistance from institutions that don't know how to keep up. This isn't new, but still disappointing. There was a moment here to do the right thing. To welcome Clark into Team USA with open arms. To say, you've changed the game, let's honor that. Instead, they went with silence. And silence, in moments like these, speaks volumes. It says, you can be great, but not too great. It says, we'll use your popularity, but we won't respect your journey. It says, fall in line, or we'll remind you who's really in charge. And that's exactly why people are mad. Because it's not just petty, it's emblematic of the larger problem in women's sports. A problem where power is hoarded, voices are muted, and legacy is only respected when it's been filtered through the proper. But here's the twist they didn't see coming. That number 17 they try to assign her, it's already backfiring. Because now that number is going viral. Now that number is being talked about. And not in the way they hoped. It's being used as proof of everything wrong with the system. A symbol of resistance, not submission. And Caitlyn? She's not just going to take this and move on. She doesn't have to. Because this entire fiasco has only made her story more powerful. More symbolic. More resonant. People will remember this moment. They'll remember the training camp where the most talked about player in women's basketball was forced to change her number without reason. They'll remember the silence from Team USA. And they'll remember how, through all of it, Clark never stopped being exactly who she's always been. A player who doesn't need permission to be. So now, the only question left is, what happens next? Because if Team USA is hoping this all just goes away, they're in for a shock. This story isn't going anywhere. Fans aren't letting it drop. The media isn't letting it drop. And Caitlyn Clark? She doesn't need to say a word. Her game speaks for itself. At this point, it's hard not to ask, what exactly is Team USA so afraid of? Because no matter how you spin it, Caitlyn Clark isn't just another player hoping to make the roster. She is the draw. She's the reason millions of people who never cared about women's basketball before are now locked in, game after game. She's the reason jerseys are flying off shelves and broadcast deals are suddenly worth a lot more. And yet, somehow, she's still treated like an inconvenience. The message couldn't be clearer. We'll take the audience you brought. We'll take the money, the press, the relevance, but your identity? That we'll control. This is what people mean when they talk about systemic disrespect. Because when someone like Clark, who has earned every bit of her status, is met with resistance from the very organization that should be celebrating her, it's not a fluke. It's a mirror, a reflection of how institutions react when power starts to shift. And let's not pretend this is about paying dues. Caitlyn Clark has paid her dues. She's shattered records, brought in ratings, and carried the sport on her back during a time when women's basketball desperately needed a breakout star. What more does she need to do to be treated like the generational talent she is? Apparently, a lot more if she doesn't play the game exactly how they want her to. Which brings us back to the jersey. Number 22 wasn't just a random pick. It's part of her identity. It's stitched into her story. And when you look at how deliberately it was taken away, especially when no one else at training camp was wearing it, you start to realize that this was never about logistics. This was about signaling. Signaling that no matter how successful she gets, they still hold the keys. But here's what they didn't count on. The cultural shift has already happened. They might be able to move numbers around on a roster sheet, but they can't move the public. Fans aren't just watching, they're invested. And when they saw Clark get forced into a new number for no reason, they didn't hesitate to call it out. And the fact that it's this number, 17, only adds to the awkwardness. It doesn't mean anything to her. There's no history, no emotional tie. It feels generic, cold, like they were trying to erase what she's built without having the guts to say it out. They could have done the smart thing. They could have leaned into her brand, honored her legacy, and used her momentum to lift the entire team. But instead, they opted for control over connection, power over partnership. And now, the backlash is snowballing because people see through it. This is what happens when outdated institutions try to reassert dominance in a space that's already evolved past them. They can't stop the cultural force Caitlyn Clark has become, so they resort to passive-aggressive tactics. Petty gestures, unspoken punishments masked as policy. The problem is they're playing checkers while Clark's playing chess. Every time they try to minimize her, she grows. Every time they try to control the narrative, it slips further out of their hands. Because she's not just an athlete. Anymore, she's a movement. And movements don't shrink when you ignore them. Let's also not forget, this decision doesn't just hurt Clark. It hurts Team USA. Badly. The optics are a disaster. This could have been a unifying moment, an opportunity to show that the best players will be celebrated, that women's sports will be treated with the same level of thoughtfulness and respect as the men's. Instead, they've thrown gasoline on a fire they started themselves. And it's not just the fans who are watching. Sponsors are watching. Broadcasters. Young athletes. Everyone who has a stake in the future of women's sports is paying attention. And what they're seeing is a team that can't get out of its own way, even when it has the biggest star of the decade sitting right in front of them. Clark's not the problem. She's the blueprint. The proof that women's basketball doesn't need to be niche, that it can be mainstream, profitable, and just as culturally relevant as any men's sport. But instead of riding that wave, Team USA is acting like it's 2005, and they can still dictate how success looks and who's allowed to have it. Too late. Caitlin Clark has already rewritten the rules. The fans know it. The media knows it. And whether Team USA admits it or not, deep down, they know it too. That's why they're reacting like this. It's not about a number. It's about the fact that they didn't create her success, and they can't control it. And if they keep pushing this narrative, if they continue to marginalize players who actually move the needle, they're not just risking fan loyalty. They're risking irrelevance. Because here's the truth. The game doesn't revolve around Team USA anymore. It revolves around the players, the faces, the voices, the ones who make the sport exciting, accessible, emotional. Caitlin Clark is all of that. And they could try to reframe this as no big deal, but the damage is already done. People care about things like this now. Legacy matters. Branding matters. And when you undermine those things without reason, you lose the trust of the people who brought you to the dance in the first place. At the end of the day, they can change her number, but they can't change what she represents. They can't rewrite the story she's already authored. They can't undo the record she's broken, the crowd she's drawn, or the millions of fans who proudly wear that number 22. So let them keep scrambling. Let them pretend this was all just standard procedure. The fans know better. And Caitlin Clark? She's still going to do what she's always done. Show up, show out, and make everyone who ever doubted her wish they hadn't. If you're with her, speak up. Drop a comment. Do you think this was about control? Like the video if you're tired of seeing power plays like this used to silence athletes. Share it with someone who still thinks it was just a number. And don't forget to subscribe, because if this is how Team USA handles the biggest star in the sport, there's no telling what's coming next.